Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on Friday. I want to thank you all for tuning in to this special series we have and related to our nation's topic, Black Lives Matter. A lot of people around our community have one thing in common they would like to see, and that's change. In this series, we're going to have an open discussion on what to do to vote. What does it mean to vote? And what can happen in our community, either the district, city, state, federal, to make those changes. We would like to welcome our panel. We have Attorney Darren Miller and we have Civil Rights Attorney Evan Lange with us. So Attorney Evan Lange, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have done in our community to propose change.
So my name is Evan Lange. I'm the owner-operator of Evan Lange Law, PLLC here in Houston. I do civil rights in the workplace. So when employers engage in discrimination, whether that's race discrimination, age, pregnancy, sex, you name it, that's the kind of law that I do. And I'm active, politically active in the community here in Houston through the Harris County Democratic Party and also the LGBT political caucus.
Nice. So we have great representation here for some of our viewers, and I'd love to hear your experience. And Attorney Darren Miller, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done in our community.
Yes, hi guys. Attorney Darren Miller, of course, D. Miller and Associates. But you know, with everything that's going on with Floyd and what's going on throughout our country, it's time for a change. And I know we've been hearing that for a long time, but too many times what I'm seeing is the fact that things continue to kind of perpetuate themselves because there's a lack of change, and there's not going to be change until we start to create that. And we have to create that by getting people more involved and keep them more informed so that we can have people up there that look like us, think like us, to help us represent what we believe in to create change. So that's what we need to start to do, and that's what we need to educate people with regards to the importance of registering to vote and getting involved in the voting process.
Exactly. So in order to create that change, it starts with you, and it starts with having a voice. And an easy way to get that is by voting. So let's begin with talking about this process. So I want to ask you guys, tell us a little bit about what the importance is to register to vote, which is like step one.
Well, I mean, again, if you're not registering to vote, you can't participate. Okay, and then too many times what I'm seeing is, you know, we get angry, we get upset about decisions or things that are unfavorable to us. And then I ask people about, okay, what are you doing to affect change? Oh, well, nothing. Well then, look, if you're not doing anything to affect change, then you can't really complain about the process. But we've got the power. And we need to utilize that by getting involved, by registering to vote, and getting our people out there to direct the way in which we want government to change its direction.
Yeah, and look, I've got to agree. If we're going to be talking about change, and yes, registering to vote is the first step, but there's also an education portion. And so that's why we're kind of using this platform so that we can really educate our viewers today on what all this means. And once you register, what happens next? So Attorney Evan, I want you to kind of shed some light to our viewers on what the next few steps for the viewers have to take to register to vote. What does that look like?
So it's going to depend on what state you live in. Here in Texas, they've not made registering to vote particularly easy. Some states like New Mexico, you can register to vote online, I believe. Texas does require some sort of paper interaction, and you either fill that out and mail it into the Secretary of State in Austin, or you can mail it into your county official, and that's how you get registered to vote. A lot of these things are designed to make it difficult to register to vote because there are people in power that want to make it difficult for you to exercise your voice. And part of the way to change it and make it easier for you to use your voices to vote people in who believe in the idea that the right to vote is your right and it should absolutely be used. So vote.org is a really easy website to go to, and it has information on whatever state you're from. It can help you figure out whether or not you are currently registered. If you need to re-register or change your address, vote.org has pretty much most resources you would need.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
Evan brought up a good point. I mean, you know, that's just kind of a good example of what I think of kind of voter suppression, okay? And what I mean by that is that, I mean, you can do everything through your mobile phone and online these days, but they want to make it very difficult for people to register to vote. Why is that? Because the people that have the power, they don't want the chance of changing it, okay? And if they make it easier for people to vote, people, quite frankly, that look a lot like us or believe a lot like us are going to make certain changes because of the change in the demographics. If they make it hard for people to register to vote, and you have to do different things, such as stand in these different lines and things of that nature, they're hoping that people stay away from the polls, which means they get to continue to keep their power.
Wow, that's a very interesting point, and I want to kind of touch a little bit of on that topic. Before we do that, I kind of want our viewers. So first, you can what Attorney Evan was kind of shedding some light on is you can check to see if you're registered to vote. There are the easy websites that it's very user friendly. If you're not registered to vote, register. I think it takes less than 2 minutes to do that, and then can you vote by mail, Attorney Evan? Is that an option for some people if they can't go?
It entirely depends on your state. It should come to no surprise that voting by mail is discouraged in southern states. They typically have a history of encouraging voter suppression. Voting by mail is obviously easy, no lines, you just vote and you drop it in the box. In the state of Texas, there's 2 reasons. You have to have an excuse to vote by mail. The first one is if you are 65 and up, I believe. And then the other one is whether or not you have a disability. And the Supreme Court of the state of Texas just addressed whether or not fear of coronavirus is a disability. And the news media reported that the Supreme Court said, no, you can't use that. I rather thought, and maybe you can, I don't know if you've read the case or not, but give your opinion on it. The way I read it was the Supreme Court said, look, you can check disability. You're the voter. You make the determine whether or not you have the disability, and we're not really going to check it. So my reading of that case was kind of the Supreme Court just left it up to everybody. But the vote by mail is available in Texas if you have that excuse of being a senior citizen or if you have a disability.
So definitely, I would say look at your the website or whatever state is applicable. I know on the screen right now we have kind of for your states those voter registration deadlines. It is different every state. It is not the same. So we kind of don't want to throw dates right now just in case you are in a different state watching. Another thing that it does give you is election reminders. So if you are the type of person that's very busy, it does give you election reminders. And or if you have any kids in the household that are not 18 years old yet, you could do a pledge to register. So they send them a reminder when they turn 18 saying, go register to vote. I think all these things are great. There's a lot of other things that play a part on it. Attorney Evan, do you want to shed some light on how important the 2020 census is, or what exactly is that?
Yeah, the census is how the government knows where people are. And in doing so, it's how the government allocates resources to certain areas. So if you don't fill out that census, the government doesn't know how many people are in your household or in the neighborhood. Obviously, they have, data scientists and stuff that try to figure it out, but there's nothing that compares to actually filling out the census. That is something that you can do online. You don't have to do that by mail. And it's very important to do because it determines how many resources are allocated to your community. Failing to fill out the census, failing to take part in the census does nothing but shortchange you and your community. It is very important to fill that census form out, and it takes very little time.
Yeah, and if I add to that, Evan, is, and minorities, unfortunately, they tend to kind of shy away from getting involved in the process. And then you look at, unfortunately, some Hispanic households, they decide when they get that information, Well, let me not fill it out because there's certain problems with regards to my immigration status. Well, again, this is not used for any of that. There's not going to be anyone knocking on your door to try and, to arrest you or anything of that nature just because you're filling it out. It's very important so that people can see what the numbers are, how much resources to allocate towards different communities. So again, if you get that information, fill it out. The more information we have, the more accurate it is, the more resources are going to be allocated towards your society.
Yeah, and look, your vote counts, and so do you. So I think filling that out really kind of shows that a little bit more clearer picture, not just yourself, your household, your family, all that good stuff. So there are a lot of helpful websites that we found, and it's just as an aid and a helpful tool for you guys on getting voting information, on the voting process, voting deadlines. One of them, we kind of already put it on the comment section. Another one is rockthevote.org, very user-friendly. So I recommend looking at those things. Also on just getting educated. Something like this show can educate you very surface level, but there are other videos around that may be able to get you a little dive deeper into the topic. So I want to go over a live comment that we have. We have Mary Lou saying, "You are 100% right, Mr. Miller. Be a part of the process. Let your voice be heard. We can do this, and the unity, with the unity and the team, people must vote."
Hey, Mary Lou, all the way from California.
All the way from California, exactly. So now that I kind of want to uncover, Attorney Evan, if I register right now, how long does this last? And is it a one-time thing, or am I registered for a lifetime?
So that's going to depend on your state. I know that there's a state, Georgia, for example. I believe it's 4 years. You have to re-register every 4 years, or they kick you off the roll. And they're pretty happy to do that because Georgia is, I don't know if you saw the long lines this week, they're engaging in some pretty serious voter suppression tactics, which is all the more reason to get out and vote. That's like the scariest thing somebody who wants to suppress the vote is to see lines around the block and people who are waiting, because that's you get people who have those beliefs out of office. But your original question was what again?
If I register to vote, how long does it last? Is it a one-time or does it last a lifetime?
Yeah, so in Texas, it's pretty relaxed. They will mail you updated registration cards so long as they're the same address. Obviously, if you change addresses, you need to update your registration because your address determines all these little districts that you're in, and you have a pretty unique back to your specific precinct.
You know, Evan, you brought up Georgia and what just recently happened there with regards to these lines and just the outrageousness there. It's just really disappointing to me. Although that happened, very recently, I don't hear any kind of talk about reform. I don't hear any type of talk with regards to changes or, okay, what can we do to make this easier? It's not like we did not know that that this was going to be coming. We've known about this for months, that this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. But because, they're blaming it on COVID and people are poorly trained and this, that, and the other, they're making all kinds of excuses to do one thing, and that's to keep people from registering and getting involved in the electoral process. Mm-hmm. And again, what I'm really encouraged to see is just how many people, they're staying with it, they're getting out there, they're standing in those lines because they want to have their voices to be heard. So, we've got to fight through this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's very important that we overcome this. But Evan, are you seeing any changes on the state or local level, federal level of sorts with regards to, I already kind of know what the answer is, to address this situation and what they're doing in Georgia?
Well, so the Supreme Court, I don't remember what year it was, but they struck down part of the Voting Rights Act, and they said to Congress, go fix it. Well, the Democrats in the House, I believe they passed legislation to fix it, and of course it went to die in the Senate. They didn't take it up for a vote. So until that's fixed, I don't necessarily know what's going to happen on a federal level. On a state level, I've seen Texas do stuff to actually increase waiting the lines. They've gotten rid of straight ticket voting. So instead of just walking in and putting, all whatever party you're selecting and then just clicking one button and being done, they've now made it to where you have to go in and literally for every single race select a candidate. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you start adding up 3 or 4 minutes extra onto a line of 100 voters, and next thing you know, you've extended a line, an hour and a half or something. That's a real change in the wrong direction.
Right.
Yeah, and I know you kind of mentioned Texas is kind of trying to make it a smooth process. You, Attorney Darren Miller, mentioned that we're in 2020 and things are not user friendly for voting, right? And what I would like to see is, all these businesses are doing the best that they can with COVID on social distancing. I even went to the George Floyd Memorial. It was super smooth. The line was super long, but it went very smoothly, right? I would like to see that also, like in Georgia, them planning, preparing. They've kind of known for this for a while on planning and preparing on a better plan or execution as businesses are doing, your business as well, your social distancing and stuff like that.
Yeah, but see, the problem is, Madi, is that the smoother that it goes and the easier it is for minorities, disenfranchised people to be involved in the electoral process, the greater the change that the people that have power are going to lose it. Now, if the numbers are low, they have a greater chance of staying in place and no changes to happen. So they're not going to make things easy. That's why we've got to fight for these changes.
Absolutely.
That's why we have to get out to the polls. That's why we have to get our neighbors and get involved in this process and make things happen.
I agree, because my next comment was going to be, isn't that what we want? So yes, I agree. We all have to kind of stand together. So now I'm going to be talking about a lot of the intimidations. Okay, as a voter, a lot of voters are intimidated by a lot of things, and the long lines is probably one of them. Is there any way around the long lines? Attorney Evan?
Oh, yeah. So different states, so it depends on your state. But in Texas, there's actually a pretty lengthy window of early voting. I really recommend, it kind of has two purposes. One, you don't have to set aside time on election day. You can actually go vote early on the weekend. Early voting dates depend on your county. You can just Google, Harris County early voting, whatever county you're in, and they'll have the times and the locations. So early voting is great. You get it done, you get it out of the way, and that's good. Your vote gets counted. The lines are much shorter, typically, in early voting. And then the second part of it is you've now taken yourself out of that equation on election day. So for somebody who can't vote early, they have to go wait in line on election day. You're no longer in that line when you don't need to be in that line, and that person really does need that space. And so it spreads it out. It spreads out the demand for voting machines over time, and in doing so, it makes it easier for everyone to vote. I vote early. I like voting early. Makes me happy, and I think it's an experience.
And Attorney Evan, let me ask you this: is there certain time frames in the voting time period? For instance, like certain hours. What if I'm waiting in this long line and then they close it down on me? Can that happen?
If you are in line, so it depends on the day. So early voting day polling times can be different. Of course, early voting, if you go early vote and there's a long line and there's like 5 more days of early voting, you just get out of the line and try it the next day, right? That's not an option you have if you're voting on election day. But in Texas, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on election day. I have personally witnessed what happens when you're in line at 7 p.m. They send somebody out from the room where they're doing the voting. They stand and they give this person a placard that says you're the last person in line. And if you are in line at 7 p.m., you are entitled to vote. You may have to wait, but it's your one opportunity every 2 years or so to exercise your voice and in a meaningful way. So wait in line.
So one of the things we do, Evan, and I'm sure you encourage your people too. So we encourage our staff, of course, to go out and exercise their right to go vote. Additionally, what we let them know is, again, if they need additional time, energy, and effort, they shouldn't have much problem if they're participating in early voting. The lines are going to be very reasonable. As Evan just suggested, you've got the chance to get in there, if there's a problem, just come back another time. But for all businesses and employers out there that you can't, please let your staff, give them the opportunity to vote. This is so important. We have the opportunity. We've seen what's happened here with Black Lives Matters and lately when we all stand together and work together. This is a chance for us to make real change. And we've got to take advantage of this. We cannot let this go on another 4 years, so to speak, without letting our voices be known.
I agree. I know there's a lot of business owners out there that are thinking, what can I do? How can I help with change? That could be step one right there, allowing your employees to go exercise that right to go vote.
Absolutely.
So I definitely love that, and I want to thank you guys both for doing that for your employees. That's awesome. So Attorney Darren Miller, do you go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I'll add one thing. As I do employment law, it is actually protected by state law for you to go vote. So if your employer retaliates against you for going to go vote, that is something that state law prohibits. And employment law it's a tough area of law to practice, but in theory, at least, it is something that is protected, is to go and exercise your right to vote.
That's great information. So I want to ask Attorney Darren Miller, do you have, when you went to go vote, did you have to present your voter registration number to vote?
No, I mean it's very simple process. You have your driver's license that kind of verifies who you are, and then gives you the right to participate in the process. It's fairly simple. It's quick and easy, and that then allows you to, again, get educated and move forward with the election process.
So no excuses. Now to Attorney Evan, can anyone register? Do you have to be a citizen or a resident to register to vote?
You must be a United States citizen. That is an absolute requirement. Anybody who is not a citizen cannot register to vote. And in fact, I think doing so is a crime. I don't remember the severity of the crime if you're not a citizen and registered to vote. You also have to be 18 on or before Election Day. You are allowed in the state of Texas to register, I believe it's when you're 17 years of age and 10 months old. But as long as you're 18 on or before Election Day, you can vote.
Okay, perfect.
Hey, Evan, I have a question for you, man. You hear a lot of stories about voter fraud, and you hear that election after election. Many times it's in these battleground states. Do you have any opinion with regards to what do you think about voter fraud? Do you think is it a real substantial issue, or is it fluff? What's your thought on that?
Well, last time voter fraud, voter fraud and the idea that the elections aren't fair is actually a tool of voter suppression, and it kind of plays out in the way of, well, I think the whole thing's rigged. My voice isn't really going to count. Why go out and do that? So that's kind of one aspect of voter fraud, the allegations of that. Second, if it happens, it's exceedingly rare, as we know. And then third, the last time that it did happen, it happened in North Carolina, and it was actually a Republican Party operative. The guy is in trouble, and they had to redo the election. But voter fraud is often actually used to make people think voting isn't worth it because it's not actually a fair election, where in reality our elections for now are pretty fair.
Exactly. Guys, it's really important. You go back to the 1960s and how what people gave up for us to have the right to sit down, to be involved in the election process. It's so important for us to do that. And, we're having to deal with these long lines and this fraud, these ridiculous fraud allegations, which are such a small percentage of the situation. And that, again, that's the way for people to manipulate things. Mm-hmm. Guys, it's so important that we do what we can to move this country back in the right direction. And the first way of doing that is getting involved, educating ourselves, registering, and voting.
Right. Now, I kind of want to turn it over a little bit, and I kind of want to talk about the elephant in the room. So a lot of people feel intimidated of politics. Better yet, they don't know the process and the information. I'm one of those that is guilty of that. Some people just don't even care either. Now, they do want change, so I feel like we all need to care right now. So why is it important to have this knowledge?
Well, again, well, Evan, I know you want to say something on it. I'll let you kind of back clean up on this. Look at where we are right now. Without going into the specifics of either Democrat or Republican, do we feel like we're in any better position than we were several years ago? And the question is absolutely not. It is outrageous what's going on and what's now allowed and what is okay. And we've got to do something about this, because for a long time there, the country was heading in the right direction. We were moving things, moving things forward in what I thought was a very positive direction. But because we got a little bit complacent and didn't think things through completely, this is where we are. And now we've got to stand up now and start to get things back on track. Evan, your thoughts?
Democracy is not a spectator sport. It's a patriotic thing to get involved, develop your opinions, have your opinions. And what's more American than being able to make up your own mind and then go and advocate for that, either in civic associations or at the ballot box. That's what so many people sacrificed to create in this country, and it's just not something that we should. You got to just do it. It's like jury duty. Some people don't like it. Some people do like it. But it's voting and participating is necessary, because when everybody is at the table and talking, invariably you're going to get better ideas and better policies and better outcomes for everybody.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we all want. I know we've heard it several times, and we're hearing change, but everyone wants something different. So I want to uncover and educate our viewers on this. We're not talking about the certain political views in this show, but we are educating on the positions that can make a change. So Evan, can you explain to our viewers the levels of the government and how they work?
I'll try to do my best to do it in short form. The United States is a federal republic, which I had a government teacher in high school describe it to me as a layered cake, right? And not only a layered cake, but sometimes it's a marbled cake, right? So you have the little swirls in it. At the top layer, you have the federal government. The federal government represents all 50 United States. You have three branches of that government. You have the executive, or the president. You have the legislative, or Congress, which is composed of two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then you have the judiciary, which is the federal judges and the Supreme Court. These elections are done every 2 years on generally the first Tuesday in November. The president is elected using the Electoral College. The Electoral College is, each state gets a certain amount of votes. Those votes are determined by how many members in the House of Representatives a state has, plus each state has 2 senators. So you add them together and you get that number, and that's how many votes each state has for the president. By way of example, Texas has 38 electoral votes, which means we have 36 congressmen and women from the state of Texas and 2 senators from the state of Texas. State of Wyoming, the nation's smallest state, has only 1 representative, but always has 2 senators, so they have 3 votes. Your state, your actual state legislature, they vote on maps that put you in a congressional district. And this is an extremely important thing that y'all need to know. And it's something that former Attorney General Eric Holder is really, really working to reform, is that your state government chooses the boundaries of these districts. They are essentially choosing which voters go into which pail. And it makes it very, very, very hard to vote out certain representatives, and in some cases makes them almost not really accountable to a large part of their voters. And so that is a really important thing. And when I talk about state government here in a second, I'll go into more of it. But so federal government, you have the president. Everybody kind of knows about that. The president's job is not to make laws. The president's job is to oversee the Army, and this is describing it in the most broadest sense, oversee the Army, international policy, and to enforce the laws that Congress passed. Congress is the legislature. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. A law has to pass both of these houses of Congress. The entire House of Representatives, which is whatever 538 minus 3 minus 100 is, that's 235, I believe. That might be really wrong. 435. 435.
Right.
There's that many members of Congress in there, and they're up for election every 2 years. So the House of Representatives can have a high turnover. The Senate, there's 100 senators, 2 for each of the 50 states, and 1/3 is up for election every 6 years. So the Senate changes at a much slower pace. No bill goes to the president's desk without both houses. And it is very important. Senators are very, very, very important because the Senate has a rule called a filibuster. So if 41 senators don't like a piece of legislation, they can essentially kill it. So a lot of federal legislation requires essentially a supermajority. That's why showing up not only when a president is on the ballot, but every election year for federal elections, if you want change, I just told you, you're going to have to vote and vote like you mean it every 2 years for 6 years plus, because it takes a long time to get those Senate seats back. And they are so important because the Senate does more than just laws. They also confirm justices to the Supreme Court and judges to the federal bench. And whether a judge has your background or a similar life experience, for me, that's extremely important. That's really, really, really important. I would imagine is important for a lot of people.
Evan, speaking of the Senate, I mean, you brought that up, and I mean, you just bring me back to when Obama was president, and I mean, that was just a travesty. I mean, you talk about him not being able to get anything done. I mean, it was just absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, I think that's why vote nothing ever changes. Is because you don't vote consistently. I'm serious. You cannot just say, Obama became president, everything's going to change overnight. Obama did become president, and he had a supermajority in the Senate for the first 2 years. That's how we got the Affordable Care Act. But in 2010, what ended up happening was all these people were just very upset with Barack Obama being president, and voted all those Democrats in the House and a lot of Democrat senators out. And there was no more opportunity for Barack Obama to really do anything for the next 6 years. There's nobody in Congress willing to work with him to do anything.
Right.
So that some change, and then the break got hit, and that put a complete halt to it. Voting consistently is absolute key to change. Our system is not geared to change quickly. It is intentionally not geared to change quickly for some good reasons or for some bad reasons. But consistent voting will get you there. It will. It does take consistency.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you, Evan. Speaking of reform, and just if we could just kind of move it to the state level just for a moment. Do you have any thoughts on this whole gerrymandering issue? Okay, when we talk about Travis County and the fact that Travis County, we all know is as liberal. By the way, I'm from A&M, and I hate UT, but it's that's where there we go.
Okay, here we
all
go.
right, Evan. I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you. But you see, how in the world are the Republicans able to control that? Do you want to talk a little bit about this whole gerrymandering issue that we're dealing with there?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, there's the federal level and they sit on top, and then there's the state level. The state actually has a ton of power. It probably has a lot of power. They have different spheres of power, but in terms of your day-to-day life, laws that like get enforced against you, a lot of those are state laws. And the state, your local, your governor and your state house, your state senate, unless you live in Nebraska where they only have a unicameral legislature, your state draws these districts and they draw them for themselves. So your state representative has a role in drawing what neighborhoods he or she wants in her district. They also draw the districts for the representatives that you send to Washington, D.C. And they can do it. Democrats live in cities, by and large. They're in urban areas, and it's easy to slice and dice them up. By way of example, there is a congressional district that runs from downtown Austin all the way to Cypress, which is a suburb in western Houston. What in the world does anybody who lives in downtown Houston have anything in common with somebody who lives in Cypress, Texas, is beyond me. But they do it in order to pad how many representatives go to Washington, D.C. It is a way to, you pick your voters. The voters aren't picking the representatives. And the Supreme Court has said that's fine. I happen to really disagree with the Supreme Court. There have been, Arizona is one of them. I believe California is one of them that says, hey, look, we're just going to have a nonpartisan districting board. Draw districts where communities, have a community and they have a representative of that community, rather than trying to play this game where it's this electoral jigsaw where you're choosing who your voters are, so you don't have to be accountable to anybody you don't want to be. It just seems, I think it's very unfair.
Marty, when you look at some of these districts and you see how the people in power, I'll say, draw some of these district lines, it's outrageous how they're, okay, my pocket of people are right here and right here, so we're going to make it here, here, and here, and this is going to, it's ridiculous. And it's done for one thing. It's to control the people that are voting so that you can influence the election. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. And look, this is a bipartisan guilty thing. The state of Maryland, controlled by Democrats, they have gerrymandered it in their favor.
Yes.
My personal opinion is when a representative is accountable to everybody, it moderates viewpoints. And when you have moderated viewpoints, you get more incentive to compromise and change and progress. And you get less of this pooled ideology that can lead to people not wanting to work together.
Right.
Yeah, and hearing some of this kind of discourages, even some people in our society, like, okay, well, if it's like that, then why do I go vote? And so I kind of want you guys to also let our viewers know, like, we need to do the change and we want to encourage to vote, but then it's such a game you almost have to play.
Well, and look, guys, and maybe I'm being too much of a negative Nelly of sorts as related to this, but what I am telling you is we can do something about this. We can address these issues. And the way in which we influence things to make change is by getting involved, letting other people know that we have not only the right, but the obligation to get involved. And by effectuating our votes and putting people in office that represent what we're thinking about, what we believe, and what our views are, then we can affect change, both at the local, the state, and then the federal level. So we can do these things. Look, again, look at what's going on with Black Lives Matter, okay? A month ago, you're not hearing, quite frankly, any white folks of influence coming out to support these types of things. But look what's going on. There are commercials about it. We support the black people. These things need to change. Look at even in the NFL. I would never have thought that the commissioner would come out and do some of the things that he's done.
Right.
What is that telling you? It's telling you that when we get together, when we get involved, when we make our voice be heard, people listen, okay? And when people listen and we get involved, that's how you evoke and you start to create change. So it is something we can do, guys, and we can get this done now by getting involved and getting started immediately.
I agree. I mean, protesting is another right that you have to make yourself heard, aside from the ballot box. And look, there's already change coming just by taking to the streets and expressing your dis with the current system. You're talking about there's executive actions, and cities are already taking action to help institute reforms. Even more so with your right to vote. There are 9 Texas House seats, 9 up for that the Democrats would have to take in order to have a seat at the table for redistricting. Redistricting back to the census is something that happens every 10 years. So if you don't go out and vote in this election and you allow your state to draw those lines for the next 10 years, it makes it infinitely harder to affect change. This is absolutely a moment that you should seize and exercise your franchise. People seriously, actually, literally died for. I mean, it's not a joke. Go and vote. Help even that playing field and get yourself a seat at the table. That is what is at stake.
Right.
Yeah, there are some places, I know you guys have maybe seen in the news, that have already done some changes locally, some changes, some laws and stuff like that. So now that we kind of uncovered the levels, local, state, and federal, and I strongly urge you guys, if you guys think it's a little bit complex, to go do some more research. It is very complex, but just kind of knowing and being in the know is very powerful. So now, this is for our viewers that, going back to the voting part. Once they go back into voting, they are influenced on choosing a candidate with beliefs and views and what they see on TV, on social media, to potentially have a seat at the table. So I'm going to tell you, I'm very overwhelmed. There are so many candidates, many districts. I don't know what is what. I see signs when I'm driving. So can you guys explain the difference between the primary and primary state election and the primary presidential election? Some of those may have already passed, I know. So Attorney Evan?
Yeah, so the primary, kind of like the, I don't know the pre-qualifying round, if you will. Each political party nominates a candidate for an office. And so the primary is just the selection of that political party's nominee. The president is probably the best example because people are more familiar with it, but the Democratic primary had, and at one point in time, 19, 20 people running, right? It got narrowed down to 1. The primary is just the process to choose one person to run against the opposing party in the general election, which happens in November. Our primary typically happens in March. It did happen in March. Then there's a runoff maybe a month or so later, but it got delayed until, I believe, July because of coronavirus. But the primary is merely selecting your preference of the individual in a party you wish to vote for. So it's not like you walk in and you say, well, I'm going to vote for Democrat or Republican in a primary, because on your primary card, on your ballot, it's going to be all Democrats or all Republicans, just choosing the nominee you would wish to see in November go up against the opposing party.
And if you don't vote in primary, how does this affect the elections coming up?
Well, if you don't vote in the primary, somebody else decides who's your party's nominee.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely important to be in the know, and just like Attorney Evan said, you have to, if you're going to vote, exercise voting, commit to it fully.
So I like to play poker, Evan. I'm a poker player, and so the other day, and this was, of course, right prior to all this COVID stuff. Can't play right now; it's too dangerous. And so I'm asking the guys. They're sitting there complaining about what's going on and certain decisions that are being made at higher levels and things of that nature. And then when I asked a couple of questions, kind of a couple of follow-up questions, because they would kind of go around the table just complaining about what was going on. Well, then when I asked them, well, okay, I got you, I don't disagree with what you're saying. So then, who's better suited to represent us, and tell me why? And all they could do is just kind of go and complain about what was going on. It's like everyone wants to complain about what the current situation is, but they don't have any idea what they want to do to try and fix it, okay? And so it's like, look, we have to find people. It's very easy to throw stones at other people, at the other people's glass windows. It's very easy to do that. But what do you stand for? And what person in power who's running stands on similar from a similar position? That's what you need to kind of look for. And I think it's very, quite frankly, in this situation, it's kind of black and white with regards to what needs to happen in terms of whether you like the way that the system is going now, or do we want change? And if you want change, then look what your options are and start to figure out, okay, which people better represent change, and we'll have the good opportunity with regards to being elected and moving forward with evoking that change.
Now, our viewers right now that are probably thinking, okay, yes, I need to find out who stands for what, where can they go? And it's not just presidential level, it's also local level. So right now, it's a lot of information for someone that probably has never been involved, but where do they go to get the candidate information? What do they do in their position? Because a lot of people may not know what the district attorney does, or on a local level. I'm just kind of throwing an example. So what is y'all's suggestion on where our viewers can go to find some of this information?
So the League of Women Voters often has a pretty good guide. There's another website called Ballotpedia. They have a pretty good guide for even really like remote races at like dog catcher. Your local newspaper, they'll often do endorsements or talk about candidates. You can also, I mean, most candidates have a website. If the candidate doesn't have a website, then maybe think twice about that person. But there's, and if you don't know what a position does, Google it. And each state has a completely different structure. Texas has a county judge. A county judge is an extremely powerful person. And in the case of where Houston is, Judge Hidalgo, I don't think she even hears cases. I think out in West Texas, sometimes county judges, they're not really even judges. They are judges, but they're not like, courtroom judges. Right. So it's Google.
So yeah, I think educating ourselves is extremely important in this process, because we're always influenced, just like you said at the poker table, of what people are saying or their opinion, or maybe what the news is saying. So just finding out yourself on what everything stands for within your city, your state, all that good stuff, so that way you can make a sound decision on what belief you may have. Now, can you vote for different parties? For instance, if I believe on one party and I like what they stand for, and then in another category, another party, can you mix and match?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think, Evan, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, that's called kind of going straight ticket. And I'm a straight ticket guy. I've always kind of been a straight ticket guy. The last election, though, my wife, and she is a lot more learned than I am, she kind of educated me with regards to a couple of particular positions at the local level that she's like, no, actually the opposing party has a fairly good candidate that's in power that should stay. And I kind of did some research on, what this particular candidate was doing, and turns out she was right. Now, unfortunately, he didn't win, but yes, so my wife, she does take the time to research each particular position, and she goes mostly one side, but there's a few positions on the local level that she likes to go. It goes the opposite direction. Luckily.
So explain to our viewers, what is straight ballot?
Straight ballot, basically, essentially, you decide, okay, do you want to go Republican or do you want to go Democrat? And these are the people that represent you. And if you want to go straight ticket to do that, click,
No
boom.
matter what. Okay.
Right. But Evan, aren't
But
they?
that doesn't exist anymore. They've taken that away
Right.
in Texas.
Right. I was just about to say that they're changing that. So.
Okay, so we do have a lot of live comments, so I kind of want to open up right now. We have Kim that says, what is the best way to learn about the candidates and the issues on the ballot, which we kind of went over that briefly just right now, Kim. Chriselle is saying, amazing information, guys. Thanks for sharing. No more than ever. This is so important. Kels is saying, yes, Mr. Miller, we are here to push the initiative with you.
Right.
Let's see. Kels again says we can absolutely change these issues. Many companies are coming forth in support of the movement. It does prove the strength in numbers concept. Yes, and then she agreed with Evan, Attorney Evan. Google can be a powerful tool at this time we live in. We can search and become informed on many things we do not already know.
Right.
Yes. So thank you for those live comments for sure on all of those that are watching. I want to thank you guys. So how can we guide, guys, our viewers on not to be intimidated, but yet encouraging them to vote? We did talk about some, sticky subjects that happen in our community that could really steer people to say, you know what, never mind. This is too much. I don't have a voice anyways. A lot of people think my vote doesn't matter. And so if we have a lot of people with that same saying, I think then it's going to go the opposite way. So what is y'all's opinion of how we can encourage our viewers to go vote?
So my point is, if your vote doesn't matter, why the hell are they working so hard to keep you from voting?
Yeah.
If it didn't matter, why are they trying to suppress the vote?
That's a great point. Very simple, straightforward. I think you've hit the nail on the head, man. You hit the nail on the head. And I want to go along with what Evan has just said. We have the power. We have the power now to evoke change. Okay? We are now arming ourselves. We are now starting to get active. We've seen the error of our ways when we don't get involved and the devastating effects that can have on our community, both locally and nationally, quite frankly, internationally, because we're, quite frankly, the laughingstock of the world. And so we need to start fixing that and addressing that. And so our vote does count. Absolutely it does.
I mean, to put it in this perspective, a presidential election in 2000 was decided by at or around 500 voters. Donald Trump won 3 states.
Okay, I know Attorney Evan was making a good point. He's probably having some technical difficulties,
Right.
so we'll kind of wait till he gets back on the line. And I kind of just want to ask, a lot of the voters or people that are trying to vote for the first time right now,
Right.
Can their vote get tossed?
Can their vote get tossed? You hear about these things that happen, Madi, but again, if you're talking about voter fraud and things of that nature, that's such a low percentage of the vote. It's such a low percentage. Typically what a lot of these news cycles want to do is suggest that, oh yeah, well, don't waste your time to go vote because it's not going to count. It's not going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And they're saying that so frequently. Why? Because they want you to sit at home so that all of their old buddies can get in line and vote. And guess what? Not only just cancel your vote out, but then get their people to essentially stay in office. So yes, there's potentially some fraud that's out there, but at such a small level, it's not something to worry about. We need to be focused. Welcome back, Evan. We need to be focused on the fact that we can influence these elections. Our votes do count, and that we can get something done.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of rumor, and during these times, the media could have some part in that too. So I strongly suggest is just going out there and just putting yourself out there, stand in the lines, or voting early to kind of avoid that. So do we have Evan back on the line?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to my internet, but
Okay.
I'm back.
No worries. That tends to happen at times. So you were making a good point, and I
Yeah.
want you to definitely bring that back up.
Okay. Yeah, so I was saying the idea that your vote doesn't matter. I mean, in the past 20 years, we've seen, in the course of 16 years, we've seen one presidential election determined by 500 votes in Florida. And then in 2016, Donald Trump became president because 77,000 people and change between the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, they decided that election. And like I was saying, we have NFL stadiums that obviously hold more people than that. And you can visualize how many people that is. And if you take yourself and two relatives, and you get several members of your community to do that, to commit to doing that as well, that's a force multiplier. You can make a difference. It is just common voter suppression tactic to try to say that you can't make a difference, and it's just patently false. If you vote and you vote consistently, and you encourage other people to vote consistently, you will eventually see change.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
definitely agree. Now, I kind of want to switch it up, but I have one more topic that I kind of want to address to our viewers. We're almost to the end of the show. There is 143 days until our presidential election,
Wow.
which is crazy. You blink and we're already there. So this year has gone by so fast. So Attorney Evan, I do want you to kind of shed some light. You kind of uncovered it a little bit early on the show, but I want you to talk about the roles of the president. I know a lot of people go out to vote and they just vote on that, maybe not local level. What are the roles from the president and what they can do versus maybe like our governor or something like that?
Yes, the president, probably one of the most, first and foremost, that she or he could do is appoint somebody to the Supreme Court of the United States. Supreme Court, those are lifetime appointments, y'all. And the schools were desegregated because the Supreme Court said that segregation was unconstitutional. Gays, I can get married because the Supreme Court said bans on same-sex marriage are unconstitutional. The lasting effects of Supreme Court justice appointments is, I can't even stress it enough. A president has 4 to 8 years. A Supreme Court justice has till the rest of his or her life. So that is one thing the president does that is monumental. And fine, you don't like the candidate? Okay, that's great. Like I said, he or she will be gone in 4 to 8 years, but those judges that president appoints will be there long after he or she has left office. That's one thing the president does that's extremely important. Foreign policy. Foreign policy is also extremely important. The president has his or her hand on the nuclear launch codes. So you should think about the character of the president. The president leads by example. And so you need to think about the kind of example that the president would set with his or her leadership. The president, in terms of legislation, he or she can advocate for certain things in Congress, but when it comes down to it, they just give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's all the president has to do with the legislation. And once he or she's given the thumbs up to the laws, it's just their job to enforce it. That's it. But that can also policy can also come in there. For example, a president who doesn't really value environmental regulations can issue directives to not enforce the environmental protection laws strictly. And think about things like Flint. We know that there is environmental racial injustice in this country, where people of color get stuck in environments that are close to toxic plants and things. And you could just go on and on and on. But the president, him or herself, does not write the law. And I have a cat making an appearance here.
They want to vote too, for sure.
Well,
her name is Hillary. So.
To your point, Evan, I mean, some would say, had certain federal agencies been in place and not dismantled, maybe this COVID issue would not have been as bad as it would have been had it happened many, many years ago. But
yeah, I'll give a concrete example that I deal with in my daily life.
okay.
The United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? That is something that is under the purview, and Congress can give them more money, but the president can set a directive about the EEOC should focus on race discrimination case or sexual harassment or sexual orientation discrimination cases. That is something that is so important. And then the judges that are appointed by the president, if you have a president that is really pro-business and is appointing like-minded judges, it makes it extremely hard. Look, I have had cases where the actual racial slur has been used in the workplace, and a defense attorney has told me that, we can defend against that, because they know that they can draft what is a motion for summary judgment to get it kicked out, and a judge may actually grant that. And you're like, in what world would a judge kick out a case where somebody used the most profane racial slur that we know? And I have an attorney who's telling me that they think that they can get the company out of that. Judges make a huge impact.
Wow.
Huge impact.
That's
Crazy.
a good example of like what we're experiencing and seeing, and how all of this plays into some of the things that we're seeing, which makes a difference on why you vote for the right person for your beliefs.
Right.
So Evan, I want to thank you for sharing that. That was very powerful. Now we're getting to the end of the show, and I want to ask Attorney Evan, what other educational information of voting or about voting would you like to discuss? One last nugget for our viewers that are watching now.
Look, if you don't want to go and do all the research, there's a pretty easy shortcut. Find an organization that you know and you kind of trust. For me, I'm a member of the LGBT Political Caucus here in Houston. We do endorsements. We have people who vet candidates, and we say, you know what, for us, LGBT issues are really important. And we go and say, these candidates for these offices are good. We've given them a stamp of approval. I think you should probably research every candidate on your own. But I'm also, as you probably could tell over the last hour, a complete political nerd. So if you're not involved at that level, but you do want to say, hey, look, I'm really interested in the environment, and you find an environmental group that's in your state, and they say, we like these candidates. That is an easy way to say, okay, didn't go through everything, but I trust this group, and they know that this issue is important to me, and these are the candidates that they issues. That is a classic way to be able to make an informed decision without. And also, one last thing was to be careful online. We all know that there are efforts to sow misinformation and disinformation. Double check. Don't just read a headline. Do your homework. We have to, and it's nobody wants to, but we've got to.
Yeah. Attorney Darren Miller.
Look, guys, I'm not going to say it as eloquently as Evan just did, but the time to stand on the sidelines is past us. It's done. We've seen what's been happening here lately with Floyd, with all these people that have been losing their lives because things haven't been getting done. It's time to stand up. It's time to have your voice be heard. It's time to get involved in the process. It's time to get those people out of office that are not standing for change and improvement and making things better and bringing the people together. This is the first time in many, many, many years where I haven't seen any movement towards the middle in terms of bringing us together. We are moving further and further apart. And guys, if we're not careful, we're going to be moving towards civil war. Civil war, okay? So guys, it is very important that we stop this, that we get involved, that we show, like during the protests, that we are all together, black, white, Hispanic, again, that we all love each other, that we care for each other, that we are a team, and get those people elected and into office who are like-minded like us, okay? Get involved. No more excuses. Stop complaining. Move forward towards those solutions.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to thank both of the attorneys, Attorney Evan Lange and Attorney Darren Miller, for being on the show today and really giving us a little bit about their thoughts, their opinion, the process, something a step closer in educating our viewers on what to do and why voting is important. I don't know about you guys, but that was a lot of helpful education information, as well as a lot of good points. And really just depicting the importance of voting. So we really highly encourage to go to these helpful sites that can help gain more insight on the positions, the deadlines coming up in your city and state. Knowledge is power. Unity is power right now. So we want to thank you, all of you guys that are watching the show right now, but most importantly, I want to thank you for sharing this video. The more we share, the more we can create that change by voting. I want to thank you for tuning in to Talk to Me Tuesday on Friday. Until next time.